In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Saint Vincent Ferrer, Saint Jude, Lady of Victory, Lady of Sorrows, Lady of Christians, Saint Ignatius, and the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. Okay. So then, we'll just continue the principal points. He summarized in his talk the principal areas that you attack in the process of the subversion. Remember that the battle that we have is a battle of the mind and a battle of the heart. That we're dealing with the war of conquering individuals' minds and hearts. And that's a challenging thing to do. And that remember that with our Lord, there's only one set of rules because there's only one truth. My body, for instance, requires many millions of things to be perfectly in place for me to be healthy. But to be unhealthy, there's a lot of options. You can use an axe, that'll make a person unhealthy. You can also use a virus, make a person unhealthy. You can also use McDonald's hamburgers, that'll make a person unhealthy. So there are many ways in which to make a person unhealthy. So when you have, we got to remember the demoralization phase, which in general, we're well past this stage in the overall history of mankind. We're past this stage. The demoralization is more or less complete, right? It's complete. But not everyone is in the same stage. And so I was trying to get a little drawing of that, which we'll work on. But not everyone is in the same stage. But there are certain rules that when you're trying to destroy, you're trying to destroy many things, and it doesn't have to appear organized. Remember the rule of St. Pius X. He said, know this about the modernists. The modernists act confused, they appear confused, but they are not confused. Remember, the modernist is not confused. He fights like a Muslim. Whenever the Muslims would fight against the Crusaders, they always preferred to fight in a dust storm. Because when it's a dust storm in the desert and you can't see, that's when they fight the best. They live in dust storms, they breathe in dust storms, and dust storms are their friend. They love darkness, dust storms, smoke, and when the Crusaders fought the Muslims in a dust storm, they lost every time. Because they fight in open combat. Their strength is in open combat, their strength is in the light. The Muslim strength is in the dark and in the confusion. But the reason why the Muslims won in confusion is because they knew how not to be confused in a confusing situation. So St. Pius X points out in the battle of our enemy, the Masons, the Satanists, the Communists, the Modernists, and we'll notice 100 years ago, that will be four very different things: a Mason, a Communist, a Satanist, and a Modernist. 100 years now, the only difference between them is the spelling. We no longer have a visible difference between these different individuals. We know that the devil is the father of lies, and as we get closer and closer to him, what do you call it? It becomes like a redneck genealogy tree. It doesn't fork. So the fact is that you just have one line, that's it. And so as we're getting closer and closer to Satan. So the main application, the other one was too complicated. This is a simplified version of all this, right? The second chart is a simplified version of all this, explained by Yuri Bezmenov. So 6 main areas of attack. And you can put this into any organization or any structure that you want to subvert. For instance, Our Lady of Mount Carmel Seminary, the Society of St. Pius X Order, the United States government, you know, Ted's Lemonade Stand and Sons. Ted and Sons Lemonade Stand. So if you want to destroy Ted and Sons Lemonade Stand, focus on these 6 elements. If you want to destroy the Catholic culture in any society, focus on these 6 elements. And the same is true with the Society of St. Pius X or any organization. Now, the reason why the communists train this in their classes is because they want their soldiers to understand the principles of combat. When you go out on the battlefield, know your principles and then apply them according to the situation. We have to create warriors to fight against the communists, and this is where we want to understand in our first phase here, what is the process, what is the system of, say, Satanism, communism, Masonry, and modernism, because it's all the same, and how is that system functioning in our own society, and then the challenging part, how do you respond to it, how do you not succumb to it, be defeated by it, how do you fight until the time of the miraculous intervention of heaven. Now, the humanly discouraging or depressing side of this part of the analysis is when you consider how the subversion works, these steps, you will note that these steps have been applied in every single part of an element of society, everywhere. So the Codex Alimentaris, they destroyed the food. Every single element of society has been attacked by communist subversion. So food, the society culture, everything, religion, the true religion, the Catholic religion, and not only the true and Catholic religion, but even the false religions, because St. Pius X points out, you Protestants, you members of false religions who need to save your souls by joining the true and Catholic religion founded by Jesus Christ. He said that 100 years ago. Recognize that modernism is not only the enemy of the Catholic Church, it is not only the enemy of Catholic religion, it is the enemy of every religion. Every religion must be destroyed, not just the Catholic religion. Because remember, when the Antichrist comes, there's only going to be one religion on earth. It's going to be the religion of the Antichrist. So remember, the devil created false religions in the plural only as a temporary stage to creating one world religion in which all human beings on earth worship Satan in his fake incarnate manifestation, which will be the Antichrist. Because he will not be Satan incarnate. He will simply be a representative of Satan, but he will not be Satan incarnate because Satan does not have the power to do that. But he will create a fake, mimicking, mockery, ape of the Catholic society. That's where he's going. We're just very close to it right now. So, the stages: religion, education, social life, power structures, labor relations, law and order. A summary of the process of demoralization. In the realm of religion, destroy, ridicule, replace with fake organizations, sects, and cults. It doesn't matter what they are. Here's what you're going to do. So you're going to destroy, ridicule. You're going to make movies. You're going to do reports in the media, ridiculing and destroying the Catholic Church. You notice in the last 100 years, there's all kinds of movies. There's all kinds of news reports destroying the Catholic Church. One example of it recently is the recent attack of the Society of St. Pius X, against the Society of St. Pius X by Michael Voris. It's a good example of how communism works. Michael Voris is not a communist. He's just he's got his own little kingdom in Detroit, and he's a conservative Catholic who is in the Novus Ordo, who says he's against Pope Francis, but in favor of Pope Francis, and he belongs to the mainstream church, and he hates the Society of St. Pius X. So he puts out a scandal piece about all the immoral priests, or apparently immoral priests, in the Society of St. Pius X. This is very much promoted by the communists. They don't care about the Society of St. Pius X. They don't care about Michael Voris. They don't care about the conservative movement. What they want to see is a universal combat of individuals against individuals, groups against groups, in order to destroy each other. And it's very important that the fight be for the wrong reasons. It's very important. Remember, avoid strike, direct conflict. Avoid strike, direct conflict. Don't forget that those two principles. So we don't want, for instance, we don't want to hear Michael Voris condemning the Society of St. Pius X because it's in heresy, even though he's the one that's wrong, because that will bring up doctrine, wrong battle. Remember in the Screw Tape letters, Screw Tape tells, which one is the old devil, the young devil? Screw Tape and Wormwood. I think Screw Tape is the old devil, isn't it? Always get them confused, right? Screw Tape's the old devil, isn't it? So Screw Tape is writing to Wormwood and telling them how to be a good devil. Written by C.S. Lewis 100 years ago, 80 years ago. So that he says, you keep making a mistake, Screw Tape says to Wormwood. You keep making a mistake. And your mistake is because you read in your devil's manual that human beings are rational animals. That's what it says in your book. It says human beings are rational animals. And you keep thinking they're rational. They are animals, but they're not rational. Because you think they're rational animals, you keep trying to appeal to their reason. Never, never, never appeal to a man's reason. That's what the enemy does. So Screw Tape tells Wormwood, don't ever say, for instance, religion is bad because religion is against the mind of man. Don't give rational arguments. That's what the enemy does. That's what Christ does. Never do that. Always argue by saying everybody is against religion. Nobody is doing that. I stopped going to the Catholic Church. One man told me, when I met him at a gas station when I was a newly ordained priest, I stopped going to the Catholic Church. You know why I stopped? And why? Because my wife married a Catholic priest. That's why I stopped going. I stopped going to the Catholic Church because Sister Mary Battleaxe, who was a close friend of Satan, beat me to death when I was a little kid. I put my fingers out, she took the ruler and she amputated all my fingers 7 times. I had to have them sewed back on 7 times. Sister Mary Battleaxe was evil. That priest is bad. How can you be a Catholic when you act like that? Always attack persons, never attack ideas. Let them believe the false ideas because those who hold the truth are wicked. Therefore, you should not hold the truth. That's a much more powerful argument than trying to prove that I'm going to prove to you that this is a black board and not white. Now, when I try to explain colors and pigments, I'm not going to win the argument. But I can prove that this is a blackboard and not a blackboard. It's black in color and not white because, you know why? I know it's black and not white because you're a racist. And because you're a stinking racist, you won't accept anything black. In fact, you're such a bad racist, you say there's scars on this board. Scars caused by black people. That's why they're black scars. When in fact, we know it's white people that cause every problem on earth. Those are white marks. And the board was a perfectly clean black board. I know that's true because you are a racist. That argument works. Trying to prove that the board is white or the board is black based on color pigmentation only works for a few idiot scientists who are on drugs. But the average individual, you need to defeat them by always making them fight on the basis of persons. That's also the reason why, I remember one time a famous case I had, one of our families joined Catholic tradition. They joined the Latin Mass. So that's very good. I'm not a sedevacantist anymore. I now believe the Pope is the Pope. And I am joining the society, and I believe you're right, and I accept tradition, and I accept the Pope. Why is that? Because Father so-and-so is against the Boy Scouts. So Father so-and-so was a sedevacantist. Father so-and-so condemned the Boy Scouts, and his son was in the Boy Scouts. That's it. I'm not sedevacantist. Now, it's very good to not be sedevacantist. It's very good to accept the Catholic truth, but it's not really because of the Boy Scouts. We aren't Catholics because of the Boy Scouts. The devil approves of that kind of reasoning. Many souls come to the truth, and they come for the wrong reasons, and therefore they are no threat to the kingdom of Satan. Now, God does right straight with crooked lines. So sometimes we come to the right place for the wrong reasons, but then we learn slowly, and the grace operates, and we take on the right reasons. The devil doesn't want that to happen. So he's going to attack religion. Let the traditionalists fight each other. That's fine. Now, one is right and the others are wrong. There's only one truth. However, make sure they fight because of personal reasons. Make sure they destroy and ridicule each other because of personal reasons. Remember, in your combat, take your enemy and always make sure, avoid the death strike. Avoid the death strike. Right now it's happening with Cardinal Vigano and Archbishop Vigano and Archbishop Snyder. They're saying very good things. Very good things. But they're avoiding the death strike. And as long as they avoid the death strike, that is, the problem is not the wickedness of Pope Francis, who is very wicked. The problem is not the moral corruption and even theological corruption in the world today caused because of our turning away from the faith since Pope Benedict. No, the problem is there's been a change of faith that happened globally in the Holy Roman Catholic Church, caused in a global crisis prophesied by the Blessed Virgin Mary when she said there will be a wicked council in Vatican II. And that in that council there is true error promoted that leads to the loss of souls and the loss of faith throughout the entire world. Don't attack that. Attack the persons. Cardinal McCarrick is evil. Yeah, Cardinal McCarrick is. But there have been evil men in the church for 2,000 years. And so that make sure that they're fighting each other, destroying each other, ridiculing each other, and then make fake organizations, sects and cults, and claim everything is a cult, everything is a sect, and then you have fake organizations. So that's what you do with religion. Make sure that is fighting in the smoke. But in order to fight effectively in the smoke, you have to know where the center of the Death Star is. You have to know what your weak element is and make sure that is never attacked. You also have to know what is the target of your enemy. At this stage, the target is only to divide. Later on, we're going to conquer. Remember, the principle is divide and conquer. This is the divide phase. The conquer phase comes later. So, in the realm of religion, we're going to do that. Education. Distract, same principle, pretty simple. Distract, do not teach the essential, teach non-essential. So for instance, the Fraternity of St. Peter, in their seminaries, they study the same books that I studied. Essentially the same books. You know, the Prumer and Tancred and St. Thomas Aquinas, of course, the Summa Theologica, the same books that our ancestors studied to learn the Holy Roman Catholic faith. What do? They focus on the non-essential. And they don't teach the essential. And so that they'll learn many good things. We'll read the details in the book. One good example as regard to us priests who are the doctors of the church. tell the priest the most important thing is spirituality. Spirituality. It's a bit like a doctor saying, in order to be healthy, you should have good manners. And you should make sure you take a bath. And you should make sure that you know that you don't beat your head against the wall, don't jump on punji sticks, etc. That's all very useful information. However, health requires that your heart beats at some point. It requires your lungs to work. It requires interior things to be happening inside of your body. That's where health is. So you might discover that there's a man who beats his head against the wall because he's really not that smart, that he eats junk food, that he steps on punji sticks, but he's pretty healthy. He's just an idiot. Another guy eats all the most healthy foods in the world, but he's in stage 12 of a 5-stage cancer. And his lungs are eaten up, his heart is eaten up, and he is about 1.5 seconds away from death. He's a health nut. He understands everything. He doesn't beat his head against the wall. But his inside of his body is finished. He's not as healthy as the other guy. He's dying. He's dead. Because the interior is destroyed. Now, what is the interior of the Catholic Church? It's not statues and stained glass windows. Nor is it rosaries and Hail Marys. The interior of the Catholic Church is the faith. The undefiled faith, without which it's impossible to please God. This faith, the just man lives by, as sacred scripture says, the just man lives by faith. So what do we want to do as in the communist world? Let them fight against each other. Let them attack each other. Let them even produce good things. Give them Holy Communion. Give them a Latin Mass. Give them the bishop doing confirmations with beautiful ceremonies, pontifical ceremonies. Give them beautiful churches. Let them even have little schools if you can't prevent that. They follow the Catholic principle of toleration. What is the Catholic principle of toleration? As Catholics, we never promote any evil. However, we oftentimes must tolerate evil in order to prevent a greater evil or for the sake of attaining a greater good. You can't execute every criminal for every crime. It'll be the death of society. But you don't promote criminals, you don't promote crime. But we have to tolerate certain things. We can't stop every evil. Now the enemy recognizes that too. They can't stop every good. They recognize that. They can't prevent every soul from going to heaven. Some souls are going to go there. They understand that. Therefore, the enemy, the Satanist, the communist, the Mason, right, that they are all willing to tolerate certain things. So we can tolerate certain things, but we are not going to promote those things. We can tolerate certain things as long as they're things that are not essential. We're not going to tolerate things that are essential. With things that are not essential, we'll tolerate. Things that are essential, we're not going to tolerate. Now then, what do you do in the social life? Education, social life. Destroy natural social relations. This is for society in general. Destroy natural social relations. The emancipation of women, the emancipation of children. We need to destroy all natural social relations. How do you do that in Catholic tradition? There's many ways of doing it. One way is to remind people, for instance, that the priest in our crisis only has jurisdiction because the church gives him jurisdiction due to the necessity of the people. So because I'm not a normal pastor, I'm an acting pastor. As a normal pastor, I will be designated as in charge of this parish, Our Lady of Mount Carmel Parish, from the bishop of the diocese. But in the time of crisis, I can act as a pastor without the permission of the bishop of the diocese because of the necessity of the people. So what's one easy way to create a division? Well, you say, well, the necessity of the people creates the situation to where Therefore, the people are the ones who give the permission for the priest. Create a division. Create a division between, so that the jurisdiction comes from the people, the jurisdiction doesn't come from from the church, from the priest. You're going to create every kind of division. Get the priests to fight each other, get the members of the parish to fight each other, and Wormwood, what's his name, Screwtape points out to Wormwood, there are many opportunities of creating division in any parish. All kinds of them. This lady does a bad job with the flowers. That one does a bad job singing. My kid can never serve. There's a million ways of creating division and fostering division in any organization involving human beings. There's a million ways to do it. So do whatever you can to destroy the social life. And remember here, the purpose is not to put them in a new society yet. Just disrupt the line of communications, disrupt the life, and help them to do it by themselves. This is done by advice. Advice is a very powerful tool. To say to people, advise them, like when women often do, your husband is a jerk, your husband is rotten, your wife is no good, you need to dump him, or at least just tell him which way is up. Give all kinds of, just create crises in the social life. And then we're going to replace the power structure, destroy the relations between the hierarchy, the superior and the inferior. Because remember the importance of communism, class struggle. You need to create your soldiers who are going to bring in the new civilization. These soldiers are going to be the workers who are against the proletariat. They're going to be against the hierarchy. And then when you put the new hierarchy in, you're going to destroy the leaders. And then attack law and order. And remember the stages. In the 1970s, cops are bad, criminals are good. 1970s. Now we're at the point where now the bad guys have taken over the hierarchy. So now we're going to flip it back over to the cops are good and the criminals are bad. And now there's new criminals. The criminals are people that don't wear face masks. The criminals are people that are right-wing extremists. The criminals are people who are practicing religion, going to church, the Catholics. These are the criminals, and that we have to eliminate them. We've got to eliminate them. So that you go from cops are bad, the next stage, cops are good. Then you go to cops are bad again. Now, for instance, they're attacking the police, the individual police, but so that they can replace them with a national police. So you're going to replace individual police with a national police. And then, but in any case, through the subversion, destroy, replace artificial religion, education, social life, power structure, labor relations, law and order, and attack those various stages in each organization. And then, of course, this thing is not so important for us, but this is about the modern world. He says that communists very much promote equality, because equality, when you put equality across the board, you destroy any civilization, making so-called equality across the board. And that because he says a man who is a criminal, who has committed 25 murders, should not have equal rights with a man who is working and doing his duty and taking care of his family. A man's working and doing his duty to take care of his family, he should not have equal rights with a criminal. The criminal's got the right to be imprisoned because of his crimes, and the man who's done well has a right to be rewarded. So that reward and punishment should be based upon your deeds, not upon your equality. So if you work hard, you get paid for working hard. If you do well, you get paid for doing well. And if you do badly, you get paid for that, based upon your duties and responsibilities, not based upon your false equality. That's the thing. And so that we replace equality-based to merit-based. A merit-based society is good. An equality-based society is going to self-destruct. It's a society built on sand. And this is the element that communists are trained. They realize we're going to take the idea of equality and very easily use that to destroy Western civilization, particularly America, right? So, and then he says here you can excel. If you excel, that's fine. If you reach the same level of excellence, perfection, if you're a really good wide receiver and you're the best guy, you get the starting position. And if somebody better than you shows up, you get to sit on the bench. So it's based on perfection. So whoever is, you receive the position based on your level of excellence, your level of perfection. The last place where that exists is in sports, right? And then the next stage after demoralization, that's a preparatory stage. What you're doing in the preparatory stage is you're making your enemy to where he won't shoot at you when you make the attack. So the demoralization phase, for instance, in the history of our society, St. Pius X, from 88 to the, say, to 2008, during that 20-year period, we had to change the thinking of the average priest, of the average faithful, because when Archbishop Lefebvre consecrated those 4 bishops in 1988, we knew that we were preserving the Catholic priesthood, preserving the Catholic faith for the next generation, and spreading this faith and priesthood to the entire world. and that we're going to convert the whole world for Christ. And that there's vocations and the development of souls throughout the entire world. What do you have to do? Just get rid of that idea. That's the demoralization stage. Change from we are Catholics who are apostolic, which is the 4th mark of the church, to be apostolic. Change from we are Catholics to be apostolic to we're just Catholics that are just trying to get by and be let alone. Let's get that changed. I want to take care of my own family, take care of my own parish, and that's it. I'm not out to get the world to be converted to Christ. I'm happy if they do convert to Christ. I want them to convert to Christ, but I don't need to do my part to make that happen. I'm not a soldier in the overall army of Christ, which is the reason for the sacrament of confirmation. But I'm just going to be an individual who's just trying to survive. And what keeps me alive? The Latin Mass. That's where it's at, the Latin Mass. That's the point in the demoralization phase. The Latin Mass, moral families. Latin Mass, moral families. Latin Mass, moral families. When we get to the end, during that 20-year period, you've created a replacement Latin Mass. The replacement Latin Mass equals the Fraternity of St. Peter, the Institute of Christ the King, and the indult masses that have been developed in the last 20 years all over the world. Now almost 25 years since 88. We were the only Latin Mass before, and only true traditional Catholics had the Latin Mass before all over the world. But now you create the replacement. The replacement is put in place in the demoralization phase. The focus is changed from convert the whole world to Christ, stay firm in the faith, recognize the enemy as modernism and the errors and heresies of Vatican II, not the individuals, but the errors and the heresies. We want to convert the individuals to the true faith. We want to bring them back to God. We're going to go to the worst sinners, we're going to go to the worst wicked people out there and bring them back to God, or do our best to bring them back to God, knowing that the answer is a true faith without compromise, and that the enemy equals the errors, the lies, and the heresies. But the number of people that believe that are less and less and less. And the army of those, soldiers of those ready to fight in that army, are losing their positions of power. During the demoralization phase, you're going to take any priest, for instance, in society, who may continue that kind of idea, and you're going to remove them, which is what they did throughout the 2000s. Remove all of us who are the ones who are a potential threat when the attack comes. When I traveled around the world in 2012 and 13, visiting over 100 priests, most of them society priests, throughout the world, I found out that during the stage between the year 2000, especially 2002 and 2012, during that 10-year period, all of us, I was one of them, who were potential threats to the new direction of the society, who were too old-fashioned. Every one of us was removed from positions of authority or importance, and everyone was sent to some sideline in the world. That's why I'm wearing a white cassock. They sent me to India. I was sent to India. I was sent to the Philippines. They say, you can go to India and the Philippines because there's a potential threat. Not just myself, but many others. My brother being one of them. He's in the Philippines. And other priests, not necessarily sent overseas, but removed from positions of authority. In the demoralization phase also, all the individuals who are going to be the leaders of the second stage, that's the destabilization, they must be put in place. And remember, as Yuri Bezmenov says, blowing up bridges, you don't blow up bridges, you get your enemy to blow up the bridges. You don't need to destroy the society. Let them destroy themselves. You lay out the foundations and you lay out the principles so that they will be able to destroy themselves, and all you do is help them along the way. Like they claim the wife of John Belushi did. He was a druggie, she had the insurance, and she just helped him along his journey to her getting life insurance. She didn't necessarily murder him, she just facilitated his journey to her getting life insurance. So the fact is that we're not necessarily going to murder them, we're just going to facilitate their journey towards my receiving your life insurance policy. Just helping you do what you really want to do. And so so like assisted suicide for the world, that we want the world to want its own suicide, and we're just going to assist it on its way to suicide. So now we're at the stage where it's assisted suicide time. Destabilization, 2 to 5 years. You begin to create a power struggle, you begin to attack the economy, you begin to attack society, and then you start to create an international crisis until you bring out your crisis. Until you bring out your crisis. In Vatican II, for instance, that was a crisis period, the 1960s. In the 1950s, there was a great moral crisis. We saw the kids becoming juvenile delinquents. The moral corruption was spreading throughout the world, and it was a bad time in the 1950s. After World War II, there was a brief resurgence of vocations and conversions because of the war, but then there was a collapse, there was a decline. And so the bishops and the cardinals and the theologians were put in place to say, we've got to fix the Catholic Church. We got to update to the modern world. And then they brought in the crisis of Vatican II. And during the crisis of Vatican II, the enemies, who they knew what they were, Archbishop Lafayette was one of them, Cardinal Ania was another one, and these other, they already knew who they were, and they set them aside right away at the beginning of the council because they had their people in place. Then they brought in a well-prepared agenda of the modernist heresies of the council, right down to the details. What kind of ceremonies they were going to have at the new Mass they would eventually implement in 1969. How they were going to set up the national conferences of bishops to break away the authority of the individual bishops in their dioceses through creating councils of bishops, conferences of bishops, and then lay the foundations for the destruction of the authority of the Pope, the head of the Catholic Church, so that the conference of bishops will be a structure that will be prepared so that this structure will do two things. On the one side, it will pressurize and destroy the individual authority of the bishops who resist the revolution. On the flip side, it will create an organization of bishops standing together in one to stand up against the Pope and fight against the Pope and diminish the power of the Pope. So it has two very positive purposes. One, to destroy the power of the individual bishops, only the good ones, not the bad ones. And two, to lay the foundations for the destruction of the power of the papacy. That's a very important structure, the Conference of Bishops. In the Conference of Bishops, you're also going to make sure that bishops are going to be able to, one of the important rules to implement in the new church, practical rule during the communist time of the 1960s, is to make sure that bishops are able to transfer from one diocese to another. This will promote greed, it will promote all manner of evil, so that a bishop who is in a small diocese will want to become in a big diocese or an important diocese. Those bishops that are greedy, those bishops that are wicked, those bishops that are ambitious, they will achieve all the positions of authority. Those bishops that are holy, those bishops that are doing their duty, they will be removed. Just let the system work itself. Let greed and power and avarice and ambition rule the episcopacy, and then it will self-destruct take the enemy and use his own power to destroy him. That's part of the work of Vatican II, one of the many elements. The foundations were laid for that crisis of Vatican II during the years before. And during those years before, you've changed education, you've changed the training. You've changed the training of the priests. One of the very important teachings, the Alta Vendita in 1820, it was released in 1820, a Masonic document released by Pope Gregory XVI, who himself was probably a Mason, by the way. He probably took it out of the meeting and then released it for some reason. Probably had a Paul VI moment where Paul VI, who said he was back and forth. He was evil, and then he would feel sorry for being evil. Then he would be evil and feel sorry for being evil. And most likely, Gregory XVI was himself a Mason, and Gregory XVI is the one who released the Alta Vendita. So he probably had like a Paul VI moment where I got to be good, I got to be bad, I got to be good. Remember, human beings go back and forth. They're not always following Satan. They're not always following God. And then he released the Alta Vendita. He was probably in the meeting, probably involved in constructing it. But the Alta Vendita, the plan of the Masons in the early 1800s, we will destroy the Catholic Church by doing two things. One, we will destroy woman, because it is the woman that is the most powerful and dangerous element in the Catholic Church, since it's the Blessed Virgin Mary that destroys Satan, and it's the mother who makes saints. It's the mother who is the most dangerous. We will destroy the Catholic Church by destroying woman. We will elevate her out of her home, take her from the place where she is a threat, and make her useless as to a threat, and we will make her a soldier in the army of Satan. Secondly, we will work on the virtue of obedience. Obedience, 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 obedience. We will make obedience the highest and most important virtue in the Catholic Church, so that when the time comes that our bishops are in charge of the dioceses, and our bishop, the black bishop, is in the chair at Rome, when we are in the positions of authority, we will pull out the obedience card. The obedience card will work because we've changed their teaching on obedience in the demoralization phase. In the demoralization phase, which spanned many generations from 1820 until 1960. Obedience, 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 obedience. And there's no problem, because if you got a saint telling you what to do, there's no problem. If you got a man of God telling you what to do, there's no problem. And then what happens? One day we put the bad guy in. And that happened in the 60s. Well, how did the bishops force the new mass down everybody's throat? Obedience. How did they get rid of the conservative priests? Obedience. How did Vatican II, its false doctrines, be forced down everybody's throat? Obedience, obedience, obedience. I am the bishop. You are a lowly priest. I am the bishop. You are a lowly faithful. What do you know? Did you get a degree in theology? Are you a successor of the apostles? Then you must obey me and believe whatever I say. This actually is in the council, Vatican II. It talks about the infallibility of the bishop. Not the pope, but the bishop. That when a bishop promotes something that he says with his firm will, you must believe. You're obliged under sin to believe whatever the bishop says. No. If the bishop, with a firm will, tells you to believe something which the church has always taught and is already contained in Catholic tradition, then you must believe what he says, but not just his firm will. So this, now we've got obedience is one of the very important doctrines to be elevated during the demoralization phase. The demoralization of women phase. Example, in the 1950s, something came to Pope Pius XII that would never have been considered by any pope before him, and that is the apparent partial acceptance of NFP, natural family planning. He condemned it. But in his condemnation, he condemned it, and he said, under special circumstances, yes, but I'm against it 100%. So he opened the door. He also opened the door to evolution. That's very important. He opened the door to evolution. He opened the door so that the doors were opened for the acceptation of the errors and heresies of Vatican II. He said we must distinguish between the theological truth and the philosophical truth and admit only that there's no contradiction between them, and that's it. It used to be the theologian was the master, and the theology was the queen of all the sciences. And when the scientist said that bread is not made out of wheat, the theologian said, no, bread is made out of wheat. Wheat does make bread, and we know this infallibly because it's the bread made out of wheat that's consecrated into the body and blood and the soul and divinity of Jesus Christ. And you don't say bread's not made out of wheat, because it is. Bread can be made out of wheat. So if the scientist decides to say something that's contrary to the truth, the theologian smashes him and kicks his head in. Also, the theologian directs him towards the truth. The theologian gives him principles, and the philosopher must obey. What do we do? No, philosophers don't have to obey, as long as there's no contradiction. Then, what do? We bring the heresy in by way of the scientist. We bring the heresy in by way of the philosopher, and then he enters the church and gets away with his lies. During the demoralization phase, the Catholic theologian said, as long as I believe the truth, it's enough. Now we go to the destabilization phase. We're going to create a power struggle. We're going to create difficulties. We're going to have a battle. Populism, irresponsible, power struggle, the destruction of this is with regard to the government. We're going to attack the economy. We're going to make the world unstable so that we can bring in our solution. With regard to the present crisis of the pandemic, of the coronavirus, what had to be done? In the demoralization phase, we needed to teach people the most important thing is health. Health is the most important thing. Remember in The Princess Bride, when the wise Humperdinck said, you know, I want to attend these torturing sessions of yours. You know how I enjoyed it and tortured them, but I've got my wife's murder to plan. I've got Gilder to blame for it. You know, I've got to prepare a war. I'm swamped. And then what is the response of the torturer? I understand. If you don't have your health, you don't have anything. So what is the most important thing? Health. Wife's murder, preparing wars, laying the foundation for the destruction, being evil, that's not that big of a deal. But health, that's important. Now there's theology behind that. Health, health, health. You must be healthy. Being healthy is the most important thing. Who can be opposed to that? If you're a healthy priest, you can say more masses. If you're a healthy Satanist, you can carve up more bodies. If you're a healthy doctor, you can help more people. If you're a healthy abortionist, you can cut out more babies. Health is so important. So that health is the important thing. That must get into the minds of the people. My health, my health, my health. We also got to tell the people what? Scientists and doctors know best. Scientists and doctors know best. Theologians and philosophers and carpenters and anyone else, they have no business getting into the world of the scientist and the doctor. When the scientist says, this is the way it is, and when the doctor says, this is the way it is, you must believe him like he's the Pope. Now, these ideas must be in the minds of the people. Then you can tell people they're going to die from a pandemic. Try that a few years ago. Try that to a normal drunk, a normal alcoholic. You're going to die from alcohol. Really? You're going to drink that? They don't care. They know their liver is hurting because of the alcohol, but right now they just want another drink. But when you make health the God, then taking another drink is a mortal sin. Then it's the most serious evil you can do is to do anything against your health. And the government is to protect the common good of society. Therefore, the government must do everything possible to make sure you have your health, or else you can't be free. That's got to be in your brain before this stupidity can work. Then you bring in the crisis. There is a pandemic. There is a pandemic. Repeat, there is a pandemic. Everybody is going to possibly die from a maybe virus that might get you sometime. Now, we have to take measures to stop that. The crisis cannot be effective. The crisis is a waste of time unless you have two things in place. First of all, a demoralized population that's ready to believe the crap you're going to feed them. Secondly, the destabilizers. The destabilizers are very important. What are they going to do during this pandemic, for instance? They're going to be the people that make millions of dollars, because, you know, printing companies have been losing money like crazy. Somebody got the contract to print those little circles that say 6 feet apart, social distancing. I love the one that says social distancing, stay together. I don't know what to do. On the airplane, I have a mental breakdown every single time. I sit on the airplane, and they say, in the case of an emergency, when the face mask falls down, remove your face mask and then put on your face mask. I don't know what to do. Remove the face mask that you're wearing and put on the face mask with the oxygen mask. So they're trying to, when they first did it, I noticed big problems in the announcement. March had a real hard time making the announcement. Make sure, used to say, when the face mask falls down, put the face mask on, and oxygen is coming through even if the face mask does not inflate. Now they're going to say, when the face mask falls down, remove the face mask. People are going to die because of that. What's going to happen? You've got to remove the face mask. Remove the face mask. So now they're saying, remove all facial covering. That creates a problem for me because now I got to shave. So the oxygen mask comes down, razor, hold my breath. I got to hold my breath long enough to remove all facial covering, and then I can put on the face mask. Anybody with a beard is going to die. So you've got to remove all facial covering. So you put contradictions in like that. Well, somebody's making money off that. So you got to have people who are ready to make these millions of face masks. You got to have people ready to print these documents that say social distancing. You got to have an entire media set up where they're going to prepare the campaign. It has to be well prepared. What words to say, how to say them, which media to put it on, how many minutes between commercials, a lot of preparation. You also have to have the legal structure in place to make sure that people are going to wear their face masks or they're going to go to jail. You have to put the replacement society in. Somebody's making a lot of money on plexiglass right now because you can't go to a gas station and buy a hot dog that's been rolling around one of those circles for the last 6 months, and 5,000 people have been breathing on that darn thing. You know, and the gas station, those little hot circles with your hot dogs rolling around. You got to grab that hot dog off of that thing with 12,000 people breathed on, but you're going to take it over to the counter, but you're not going to breathe through that plexiglass. Somebody's making money off that plexiglass. Somebody's making money off those face masks. Then you've got to have a campaign. You've got to have police. These are the destabilizers. Now you've got to have your contact tracers. These are the destabilizers, the leaders that set up this stuff, real men in place. A man once told me in the preparing of a festival, he says, to prepare a festival, he prepares a festival of San Gennaro in Phoenix every year. The same family's been preparing it for the last 1,000 years. There are 3 San Gennaro festivals. One of them is in Naples, Italy, the original one. One's in New York City, the other one's in Phoenix, Arizona. And the same family runs all 3 of them. Same Italian family. It's his full-time job. He says, you know, to run this festival, by which have about 1 million people participate in the festival every June or July, whenever it is, I was going to give a talk at a solemn high mass at the festival back in 2005, but I got shipped out, transferred, and didn't happen. But I was going to be doing a solemn high mass for the people of the festival, and then giving a talk to all the people of the festival, of the San Gennaro Festival in Phoenix 2005, but it didn't happen. But nonetheless, so he said, to prepare, it takes one person. I make all the phone calls, I do all the preparation until the last 3 months. In the last 3 months, I hire 2 helpers. We start pulling together vendors. And then at the very end, I hire about 50 guys to run the whole operation for 1 million people. I only need them at the very end. At the first stage, you just need one guy who knows what he's doing, demoralization phase. He's moving people around to change the ideas and thoughts of the whole world, or the whole culture hereafter. The destabilization phase, you got to hire people. You got to hire real people to implement the practical side of the destabilization of the country or the culture. There's where real people are involved. There used to be the few people involved to make sure, for instance, that when the crisis comes, they're going to deal with that crisis. In our Society of St. Pius X, we had a crisis in 2012. In the SSPX, in the society as a whole, we had a crisis in the 1960s. A good example is Woodstock. Woodstock needed to be a success story. It needed to have 500,000 young people get together and do healthy things like smoke pot, do drugs, and attend a concert for peace without murdering, stealing, raping, and plundering like they did in every other concert. In order to do that, the military had to be involved, and they were prepared. They realized at some point, for instance, they might run out of food, which they did. Helicopters flew into the Woodstock Festival to bring in food and medical supplies. They were all prepared. They wanted to make sure that this festival would be the peace festival of the rebellion, and there would be no raping, no crime going on during this festival. So they placed people throughout the entire festival to make sure they're all healthily doing drugs, they're all healthily being rebels, but no one was doing a crime. They ran out of food. They had the military in place. They had helicopters in place. They had people prepared in the local area to deliver food and medical supplies. They had doctors. They had porta potties. There were babies being born. They had medical treatment in a spontaneous festival that just happened because of the people. Now, nobody figured out, how did the spontaneous festival happen? How did somebody in California spontaneously know he was supposed to go to New York? Several million flyers were printed. That cost money, more expensive back then than it is now. They sunk all kinds of money into printing these several million flyers, sending them throughout the entire country to get people to Woodstock in New York. That's destabilization phase. Somebody's got to do the printing. Somebody's got to prepare the helicopters. Somebody's got to have a backup plan if things go wrong. Somebody's got to build the stage. It took them 3 or 4 weeks to build the stage. Somebody's got to make sure the sound system is working. Somebody's got to make sure that transportation is good, that you can take care of any medical emergencies. All these things will be taken care of. These are the destabilizers, to make sure that when your crisis comes, it pulls off exactly the way you want, and it becomes a symbol of the old rebellion of the 60s. What about the SSPX situation? 2012, what happens? They speak out liberalism, modernism in the society. Someone monitors which are the priests that are making noise, which are the priests that are not perfectly happy. Take a note of each one of them. And in the upcoming years, they are going to be eliminated, sidelined, eradicated. And that's what's happened in the last 6 years. That's one reason why I mentioned that point specifically in the dog barking sermon back in 2012, that you will see what will happen after this crisis of 2012. You're going to hear, oh, that priest, he was really bad. Oh, that other priest, I don't know, I can't tell you what he did because it was awful. And the priests who are going to be a threat to this modernist movement within the society are going to be slowly eradicated and removed. That's after the crisis stage, in the normalization stage. In the crisis, you must be well prepared. In this crisis, you're going to be Your destabilizers are ready for the crisis. And then Yuri Brezhnev points out, what happens when you get from crisis stage to the new normal? What do you need to do? Eradicate all the destabilizers. Eliminate them. Because the destabilizers know what you're doing, and the destabilizers, they're like the brown shirts. When Adolf Hitler took over, he used the brown shirts in order to get in power. And then they all came for their reward. So he killed every one of them. No reward necessary. Kill them all and replace them. That's important. Because if someone helped you in power, you owe him something. You owe too many people too many things. Solve the problem by eliminating them. That's why Yuri Brezhnev points out, very often in the transition from crisis phase to normalization phase, some of the worst communists realize they're dead. If not physically dead, isolated and removed. They realize they've been lied to. They realize they were only useful idiots, and it's from that group that will often come the staunchest anti-communists. So, and the devil knows that very well. St. Augustine is an example of that. St. Augustine hated the Catholic Church. St. Augustine was proud. St. Augustine was extremely evil. St. Augustine was impure, living with a woman for 13 years and having children out of wedlock. And then St. Augustine converted. The wicked St. Augustine became the greatest of all the fathers of the church. We universally recognize that St. John Chrysostom, all of the other St. Anselms later, St. Gregory Nazianzen, all of the other fathers of the church are nothing compared to St. Augustine. St. Augustine was the greatest enemy of the church. He converted and became the greatest enemy of the devil. Saul of Tarsus was the greatest enemy of the church. He converted and became the greatest enemy of the devil, so that the sacred scripture tells us Saul of Tarsus was a greater apostle than the other 12, including St. Peter and including St. John. The Holy Ghost says that. St. Paul is the greatest apostle. St. Augustine is the greatest father. There are other great apostles. There are other great fathers. Now, the devil knows this very well. He doesn't know who's going to be Saul of Tarsus. He doesn't know who's going to be Augustine. But if you kill them all, you don't have to worry about it. And remember, the devil's not noted for his morality or his honesty or his goodness. Don't forget that. When you come to the devil for a paycheck, you might get something else. After the crisis phase, you go into the new normalization. Now, you can't kill all these guys at once because they're going to be the beginning of your leaders. So you're going to lie to them. You'll let some of them get from destabilization phase to normalization phase. An example of that right now, Bishop Fillet, who was promised to be the bishop in charge of all Catholic tradition. He was promised to be the bishop in charge of every traditional group, who would be a cardinal in Rome, who would be sitting next to Pope Francis, having breakfast with Pope Francis and Pope Benedict, and he would be the greatest ruler of all tradition. Right now, he's taking his medication, and he's drinking bad coffee at the priest table in the new crappy seminary in Virginia. He didn't get the position that he was supposed to get. It turns out the promises were lies. And he was going to help the church so much by being inside of Rome to try to convert the Romans, to try to influence in a positive way. He would allow Father Pagliarani to be the new superior of the Society of St. Pius X, but he would be the leader of Catholic tradition. Instead, he's hanging out in Virginia in room 307 next to Charlottesville, where they tore down the statue of Robert E. Lee. That's it. So that's what happens from crisis stage to normalization stage. Now, in the normalization stage, what happens? All the crisis temporarily ends. The destabilization is temporarily halted. This is important because you want to bring the people with you to the next stage. You can't beat someone every day. You can't torture someone every day. So when you get to the normalization phase, you let them have their life go back to normal. ish. 2 steps forward and 1 step back. You let them go 1 step back. You do that only in order to give a small break to your soldiers, to recruit new members to your army, to prepare for the next stage of development, to go 2 more steps forward, and afterwards 1 step back. So, normalization phase, that all of the economic collapse, right now, for instance, the United States, we're trying to make the economy of the United States crash. Who's the responsible? Well, of course, Trump. And we're going to replace it with a pure communist government. And when the pure communist government comes in, now we only have a mostly communist government, so we need to become a purely communist government. When the mostly communist government is replaced with a purely communist government, there will be a brief period of so-called peace. If you take your vaccine like a good citizen, you're going to have life nice. And everything's going to be fine. We're going to promise you the moon. Life is so easy. You can buy anything you want with your cell phone. You don't even need a credit card anymore. You can buy with just with your fingerprints. And everything is so easy. But then one day your fingerprints aren't good anymore. And one day your cell phone doesn't work anymore. Apparently one of the experiments in Boston, Massachusetts, when they had the shoe bomber, whatever the idiot, the bomber in Marshall, Massachusetts at the marathon, apparently they did a test. When that bomb went off, several hundreds, if not 1,000 people pulled out their cell phones to make a phone call in the middle of the city of Boston, and their phones didn't work. They did a test in a 2 or 3 or 4 block area to see if they could block all phones only in that area. But if you're outside the area, it'll work fine. Worked. Couldn't make any phone call. Then, of course, they can obviously, when you don't pay your phone bill, your phone doesn't work. You can easily make your phone not work. Everything depends on your phone, then your phone doesn't work. We become more and more a slave in the World Wide Web, which is used to catch flies. Web is used to catch flies. So in the normalization phase, we're going to make more and more of a web around the people. Let them have a brief period of peace, and then repeat the process until the whole world is slaved and totally enslaved under one ruler. And that's the essence of the process of the destabilization. So we already mentioned that already. Destabilization, work economy, law, military, media, immediately lead to the crisis. And then also, I forgot to mention radicalization. We talked about it, but the important principle of destabilization is this word, radicalization. All that means is the destabilizer walks into any community and he finds out who doesn't like who and make them fight against each other and no compromise. We're going to create total war, the husband and the wife, the children and the parents, the employer and the employee, the brother and the brother, the sister and the sister, every person. It doesn't matter what they are, radicalized. What does that mean? I'm going to die rather than wear those green sneakers. I'm going to die rather than let you have that cup of coffee that you want. Radicalize all human relations. Go into any place, and this is the satanic at its work, at its essence. Remember the word all. Satanism equals the organized destruction of all order. At this point, we're working on every single order, and we're going to rip it all apart. That's the destabilization phase. This helps complete the demoralization phase so that your enemy will not be able to effectively unite and fight against you. And so that's very important. Destroy no compromise without a fight. Stop all human relations, everybody against everybody. Violent clashes are going to be seen as normal. Black Lives Matter, blowing things up, burning things down is part of this. I don't care, blacks against blacks, blacks against whites, everybody against everybody. They got to kill each other. And it's interesting that just simply not killing each other is part of the answer. Don't get into the fight. Now, and then the law and order. You're making the necessity for a law and order. Remember the 1970s? Cops get shot at. Cops can't shoot back. What was the reaction? Now the cops can shoot you because you ran a stop sign. And we remember the 70s. In the 70s, cops couldn't shoot anybody. Now the cops can arrest you without a warrant. They can actually pull you over without any going to the judge and getting a warrant. They can do any kind of probable cause, and that's a good cop because he's standing for justice. Now what's happening in 2020? As we say to the seminarians, SSDD. Same sterkera, different day. What's happening? Now, because a cop murdered George Floyd, and he did murder him, now the cops are afraid of doing anything. Sound familiar? Now the cops are not going to help when you go and rob when the criminals rob banks and destroy things. The cops don't touch anybody because they're afraid. We don't want cops to be afraid. We don't want cops to be afraid of criminals. So what's the next stage? Pendulum is over there. Now the pendulum is going to swing. And now the cops are going to go after who? They're going to go after the bad guys. Only they're not going to make it to Black Lives Matter. They're going to make it to every Catholic church. They're going to make it to the Good Citizens House. Like just a couple weeks ago, one of our parishioners, they were at a rally in Toronto. And at the rally in Toronto, they were protesting against the, this garbage going on. While they're protesting, there are these mobile cameras going through the crowd. And they said, these are face recognition cameras. So 2 weeks ago, at 3 o'clock in the morning, ... knock on the door, police officers, we heard there was screaming at your house. Nobody was screaming, they were sleeping at the time. And they just talked to them for about 20 or 30 minutes. So nobody got arrested, just visited 3:18 in the morning. Because of face recognition cameras. And other people get visits. Do you really want to participate in the next protest? To create a sense of terror. Now the cops, they weren't allowed to arrest anyone. The cops weren't allowed to do anything. Let the cops do their work. And then they're going to do their work. But they're going to do it on all the wrong people. So from one evil, we flip to the next. So they control both sides of the narrative. That's the destabilization phase. Radicalize everybody. Make everything insane. When the cops kill you, it's because you ran a stop sign. When you try to kill a cop, he can't do anything. So that no matter what, the cop is in an impossible situation. Somebody tries to murder him, he can't shoot back. But he can shoot somebody who's unarmed. Create an impossible situation. And then all of society will collapse. That's important in the destabilization phase. And then also it says there are sleepers. The sleepers arise. That is, the people that you put in to the police department, to the positions of authority in the Society of St. Pius X, to every organization. Now is time for them to arise. Now is time for them to show their colors to create the crisis. And then the crisis comes, and you're going to provide the answer to the crisis. Right? And the answer is going to be the new civilization. But the new civilization must be in place. And I think that then you're at the final stage, and it's the conclusion here, the normalization. After the violent change of power, you're going to reverse destabilization. And you're going to stabilize by force. Stabilize by force. Because after all, everybody wants to be healthy. The only way to be healthy is to take your vaccine. Take the stupid vaccine and you don't have to wear your mask anymore. Take the stupid vaccine and you don't have to be 6 feet away from people anymore. Take the vaccine and everything's going to be okay. And if you don't take the vaccine, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to leave you in your little bitty prison. And you can't get a job at Ted's lemonade stand anymore, because in order to get a job at Ted's lemonade stand, you've got to sign up an electronic form that knows you are able, safe to serve lemonade. You didn't get the vaccine. You can't serve lemonade. So you're going to have to stay at home. You're free to stay at home until you die of starvation. And if you come out, you're free to stay in our prison or in our little death camps called FEMA camps. And all you have to do is accept your little vaccination, and we'll never ask anything from you ever again until tomorrow. And then the day after that. They'll never stop asking. They'll never stop asking. Stabilized by force. And then that's important. And then remember, like I mentioned already multiple times, all agencies are no longer needed. The sleepers, the activists, the social workers, the leftists, liberals, homosexuals, etc., they're to be eliminated. Not all murdered, not all killed, isolated and removed from any place of importance, and you can always replace them with new ones when the time came. And remember, no room for dissenters. That's the normalization phase. You will find that the people who have been demoralized, who have experienced the crisis, they themselves will not tolerate dissenters. Hence, snitches get riches instead of stitches. That's why it says, and been saying for multiple years, if you see something, say something. They never tell you what that something is. They never tell you. They never explain what it is. If you see something, say something. And then no more. Then you also remember all the organizations you created, you get rid of them. Here's an example of that. Normalization phase underway in the Catholic Church. We don't need Ecclesia Dei Commission anymore. That's an example of a communist social league. You created the league, the Anti-Defamation League. You created this American Civil Liberties Union. You won't need that anymore, because some of the members of that league actually believe in that stuff. So you got to get rid of them. So the Ecclesia Dei Commission is an example of such a league being removed in the Catholic Church. Bottom line is, communism has spread itself fully and perfectly throughout the whole of the Catholic Church. And I guess we're 30 minutes late for lunch. But in any case, that, it spread itself completely. So we'll do the question and answers afterwards. I would assume that the lunch is probably cold by now. I think it's cold lunch anyway. So we better close here. It's 1:26. We'll go ahead and close and say a prayer. In the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. Glory be to the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. St. Vincent and Ferrum, St. Jude, Lady of Victory, Lady of Sorrows, Lady of Christians, St. Ignatius, and the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. So I guess we can head in straight for the Holy Lunch.